Hi guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm gonna be sharing you a bit of the process I had to finally fill in my 30 well palette with gouache. I have two previous videos here on the channel where I was swatching colors to try and select the best. I had hopes and dreams to have a ready to go gouache palette where I could just start painting without too much planning, and a bit like I do with watercolor, I also didn't want to be having to deal with palettes and leftover paint, because as you know, gouache can be reactivated. But as you will see at the end of the video, I arrived to some interesting conclusions. So for now, you will see me just organize the colors I had selected as my favorite into hues, so I could understand better which ones I would like to have in the palette. I just took all of the colors I had previously swatched and I cut them into individual swatches and put them side by side, because I find it easier to decide which tones I would like if I see them close by, or sometimes you can move them around and see how they work in combination to each other. I think it's a great way to make some decision. We'll leave you here so you can see me preparing the palette and filling it in. I will be swatching also the colors, and I will do a little demo painting a tiny little folk art inspired insect, so you can see also the colors used in a piece. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to stick around, I hope this will help you also if you are in this journey with me, and I will see you soon. Hi everyone, so I'm back live here to swatch the second palette, which I actually used the leftover options that I have for my first 30 well palette that I still liked and wanted to have in a palette form. I used my art toolkit folio and that's how I organized them. I kept the two mixing palettes here in the middle. I use the two big square ones for the yellows because they are the only yellows I have, and then I use all the other ones for blues, greens, reds and earth colors. So I'm gonna swatch this now, but before that I'm gonna give you a little update on this big fella over here that I filled a few days ago. There are some issues but I wanted to be honest with what happens with this sort of palette, which I hadn't considered, is the wells are in both sides of the palette. So if you close it, the gouache is quite dry and some of them just pop up and out of the well. You see, now I'm playing puzzle over here. Some of them broke, they got really dry. On the other hand, I have this one here that's still wet. This is Winsor & Newton Gold Ochre. It's still wet, and I think it's because there was some binder separation in the beginning. And I also had some issues with this one over here, which is not hardened yet. So I tried to close the palette and I could not close this side because I was scared this was going to run over here. And yeah, there was also some binder separation here. This was the Cobalt Green Dip from Le Franc Bourgeois. And it would not dry, so I added a little bit more paint. I really mixed to make sure that there was no binder floating on top, but still it's not completely dry. So I had only one paint that was breaking and popping out, but now it's happened to many of them. I can see many of them have broken. So to be honest, I'm not quite sure how practical this would be for me. I'm thinking that I'll probably I will use the ones that I have filled in here in this palette as they are. I'll try to keep the palette open while I'm using up the paint, and once I use up all of the gouache, unfortunately I'll go back to using them from the tube because I don't think it's very practical, this type of palette for gouache, because of this question of breakage. And it's very common this happen with gouache on the palette to dry and then crumble like this. So every time you close, they all can get mixed up, which is not ideal. And yeah, I really wanted to have my palette set in a way that I could just open and use it, but unfortunately that experience showed me that it's not gonna work very well for what I have in mind. So I'll probably use that after for watercolor. And yeah, just telling this so you can also learn from my misadventure. Another thing that I learned through this experience is, for example, here, the gouache, when it dries, it usually loses some water, so it retracts. So I'm used to putting more gouache than I think it's needed because it will retract and, you know, get dry like this one, these ones over here. But for some reason, not all gouache behaves the same. So the Geisha Blue from Holbein here is still a bit wet. It hasn't retracted, and so has is the Chrome Oxide Green. It's still a bit wet, so it's quite tall and when I close this and I reopen, sometimes I find these two pens stuck to the lid. So learn from my mistakes. Don't fill it in too much. You can always add more later, but overall, I have to say I have seen so many people using gouache from a dried palette and it seemed to work well for them, but so far for me I'm finding it very fiddly. I mean, they break, they crumble, they get mixed, or maybe they don't dry at all and they get glued to the top. It's a whole thing. So I think I'll give up on using gouache in a palette, to be honest. I'm probably gonna try to use mine fresh from the tube after I finish these that I poured, of course. I'm gonna do my best to use them, and then after I'll just stick to watercolor on the palette. But for the moment I'm gonna swatch review the colors that I chose for this palette over here. Guys, I'm so sorry. I was here swatching and talking, sure that I was recording, but I wasn't. And as you can see, I already swatched almost half of the palette. I'm really sorry. I cannot afford to record this again now because the sun is setting and I'm running out of daylight. Basically, I had to pause because I noticed one of my pens had disappeared somehow, and I had to go back to the video to see what happened, and they were stuck to my other 30 well palette. So after this I started swatching and thinking I was recording, but clearly I wasn't. Now let me go through again quickly with you the colors that we have here. So the first one that I swatched is this beautiful warm red, and this is Vermilion Hue by Schminke Horadam. Then we have Winsor & Newton Perylene Maroon. Another Winsor & Newton, this is Raw Sienna. I use this as my warm yellow. And then as my cooler yellow, I have Nickel Titanite Yellow by Sennelier, which is kind of a pastel pale yellow. I'm not very used to working with that, but I was curious to try and incorporate in some color palettes. Then we have this color that it's hard to define, to be honest. It looks a bit a mix in between a red and a brown, and it's called Chinese Orange, and this is by Holbein. Really lovely tone, very similar to the another tone I used in my 30 well palette. I have it here, Venetian Red. It's quite similar when it dries, but this is a bit more opaque. Then we have Van Dyke Brown by Schminke Horadam as well, which I really like, also in watercolor. It has some texture. Then we have this medium brown over here, which is Burnt Umber by Holbein, followed by a very dark brown by Sennelier, which is called Raw Sepia. And this I was mentioning before, I bought a long time ago in their previous gouache line. I'm not sure if now in their new released gouache they still have this color, and if it is the same formulation, but it's a really lovely, very dark brown. Then I have Smalt Blue, which I was also saying it's a color I really like, so much that I have the acrylic gouache as well in the same color. And by coincidence, I have here my brush rest I made myself using air dry ceramic, and I painted exactly the same color using the acrylic gouache. So you see that I really enjoy Smalt Blue. Then we have the Geisha Blue by Holbein, the Irodori collection, very nice opaque sky blue, followed by Helio Blue by Schminke Horadam, which is more transparent. It's more of a primary type of blue. Now let's continue. We have another blue. The last blue is Indigo, and this is also by Holbein. It's part of their Irodori collection as well, if I'm not mistaken. Very dark, nice, moody blue. It goes very well with the yellow, coincidentally. Look at this primary trio over here. Indigo, nickel titanate, and Chinese orange. Kind of modern take on the primary triad. Now let's go with the greens. We have one that I absolutely love. It's called Russet Green, and this is also part of the Holbein Irodori collection. It's a transparent type of olive green. And I think it's nice to have a mix of very opaque and a bit more transparent or even textural gouache, so we can create interest in your painting, you know, unless you really want that very flat look. But I like to have a bit of a variety. Then we have a very vibrant poppy green by Holbein that is called Leaf Green. I like it a lot as well. It's almost a neon type of green, and I think this is, I don't know, it makes me think of spring really, because it's all this new growth. I have my vases here and I see the new leaves popping out, and they all have this bright green color. Then we have chrome oxide, which is one of the colors that haven't really gotten dry like I expected, and it's really opaque, as you can see here. And last but not least, we have permanent olive green by Schminka Horda. This is a bit more yellow and more opaque than the russet green. Now they are wet, so while they are drying, I'm gonna try my best and do a very quick demo like the one I did with my bigger palette. Let me zoom out a little bit. So I painted this the other day when I was swatching my bigger palette, and I also drew this one, and we'll see how it goes. This is again from the Imagine a Forest book I shared in a previous video. And I'll put some music while I'm painting for you not to get too bored. See you soon. So I'm gonna stop here because it's getting really dark and I don't have time to let this dry to share with you. It's not a masterpiece by any means, it's just a way to try and test how the colors work together. I painted a little bit here where it was still wet. I was aware it could happen, but like I said, I'm running out of time. I hope you enjoyed this little demo. Just a simple way to swatch colors and try and test them, how they layer over each other. Of course, with more time, you can do bigger and better things. I also felt like this paper was not really collaborating with me. This is a little sketchbook I created myself using some inexpensive paper I have laying around, and it is inexpensive for a reason. It's not the best, to be honest, but nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed this long session of swatching gouache. I wanted to mention also one thing that I have noticed by using gouache here from the palette is it's not as easy to control the amount of water you are using as when you are squeezing paint out of a tube into the palette. I personally don't have a lot of experience using gouache. I have painted with gouache a few times, but I don't have the same level of experience and comfort I have with watercolor, for example. And I felt that a few times I was adding too much water, the paint was getting transparent, but then if I didn't add enough water, the paint was drying. So, you know, I think this is one of the caveats of using gouache from the palette, is that you have all of the paint here already and you add water, but you cannot dose as well as if you're using a palette and squeezing out of the tube. Of course, you can use also the palette here and add water and paint, but I don't think it's very practical for gouache because gouache is an opaque medium. Watercolor is fine to do that. So all of that to say that I don't think I enjoyed the experience of working with gouache from a palette. I really wanted to. It's not for me. I think that I'll have to find a ways to use gouache the traditional way. I'll use up the paint that I put on these palettes and then I'll convert them to good old watercolor. But as usual, I'm always super curious to know what you think. Let me know if you do use gouache on a palette like this. Maybe you have some suggestions or tips to give. I would really appreciate, and let me know what you think. I really enjoy reading your comments, and don't forget to give me the thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, and I hope to see you here soon. Bye!